Okay. First prize winner is Mrs. Mary Napper from Kilmacombe. That happens to be in my constituency. There you have it. What? Well, it wasn't me that won it, because the second prize is Derek Mackay. No, not at all. But it is a Derek, actually. Second prize is Mr. Derek Guthrie from Burton-on-Trent. Congratulations. And third prize is Mr. Paul Bigster from Dunfermline. Congratulations, and report to the HQ stall. And now I call up the National Secretary, who will give the results for the elections to national office.
Good afternoon, conference. I will start with the election for the position of Organisation Convener. Fiona MacLeod received 632 votes. Greg McCara received 449. Therefore, Fiona MacLeod is duly elected as our Organisation Convener. Congratulations, Fiona. Moving on to Political Education Convener. I think it's right that we show our appreciation to Julie Hepburn for the hard work that she's done in that role. She's certainly been... She has certainly left some big shoes to fill, but I can confirm that those boots will be being filled by Mr. Douglas Daniel. The full breakdown of the election results will be available online in the coming days, so I will just announce the winners and those who made it onto the NEC. So the two ordinary members of the National Executive Committee elected from amongst our parliamentarians are Stuart MacDonald from Glasgow as opposed to Cumbernauld and Tommy Shepherd. Moving on to the 6 ordinary members of the National Executive Committee from non-parliamentarians. The first name that we have in front of me is Grant Toms. Then Josh Menny, Kirsten Oswald, Margaret Ferrier, Maddie Hunter, and last but not least, Ros Curry. You'll be glad to know that I won't be reading out all the names elected to National Council and just, the various other internal committees, but that information will be made available online as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. I can also say to Marion Plunkett, congratulations, because it's your 40th birthday today as well from Vale of Leven branch. Congratulations. Congratulations to all those who have been successful in being elected to office within the party. We now turn to resolutions. Resolution 18 to be proposed by Kirsty Blackman MP and seconded by Alison Thewlis MP. Please welcome Kirsty Blackman.
Conference, friends, I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to stand on the stage to speak to a full room, unlike at other party conferences. But friends, it's absolutely shameful that we are still having to fight for simple dignity for women. I've had the privilege of playing a small part in the campaign to get VAT taken away from sanitary products, and actually VAT taken away from other products too. We've made the case on stage before that sanitary products are not a luxury. Conference, neither are incontinence products. Neither are breast pads for those women who are feeding babies. Conference, these are essential products and VAT should not be levied on them. There has been, Conference, a cross-party coalition of women who have worked on these campaigns. From the other parties, women like Jess Phillips, Monica Lennon and Paula Sheriff have taken part and have pushed this cause. But at Conference, our very own Gillian Martin and Julia Hepburn were the ones that led the charge and started the campaign to ensure that women with the least money have got access to free sanitary products in Scotland. I was so delighted, Conference, when Angela Constance announced the pilot that's taking place in Aberdeen to provide women with basic dignity, to provide them with access to sanitary products so that they don't have to bodge together something made out of paper towels, so that they have that basic dignity, Conference. But there is much more that we still have to do. The reality is that women are still paying VAT on sanitary products, despite the fact that we've won the argument. This still has not been fixed. That money is still going to the UK government, and the UK government is distributing it to charities who provide help and support for women. However, one of those charities was an anti-abortion charity, Conference. That's hardly doing the cause of women's empowerment any good. Conference, this is something that I, my SNP friends and colleagues, and women across the political spectrum will keep fighting on. We need women to have access to these basic products that provide basic dignity. We need to keep fighting on this. Thank you so much for your support. Please support the resolution.
Thank you, and Alison Skoulas to second, to be followed by Gillian Martin, MSP, who will speak in favour of the resolution. Alison.
Thank you very much, Derek. It's quite a strange thing to stand before a room that is quite as full as this one and talk about tampons. But this is something that I've had to do with many wonderful colleagues over the past couple of years. And I'd remind you, Conference, that Gordon Brown, when he managed to reduce the VAT on tampons just a little bit, couldn't even bring himself to mention it in his conference speech, in his budget speech that year. So to stand in front of you and talk about tampons is a little scary. It's almost as scary as when I first raised this in the House of Commons not long after the 2015 election. And it's a bit weird. If you think it's weird up here, it's also weird to raise it in a room in the House of Commons full of fusty old Tories. There are few things as daunting than standing in front of a room full of old men and talking about periods. But that's what we have to do, Conference. Both men and women, we need to destigmatise women's experience. And I pay tribute to all of the women, cross-party, as Kirsty has mentioned, who've talking about this, to Women for Independence and for other groups across the country who for many years have carried the torch for this campaign. Now, we raised this as the SNP. We had it in our manifesto in 2015, and I raised it in committee, as I said, and the UK government at that time said it couldn't be done. So we've moved quite far in those 2 years to actually get UK government ministers to talk about sanitary products in the EU Council of Ministers. It is progress, but the UK government are stalling and they're making excuses. And Conference, we need to tell them that that is not good enough. I got a letter on the 26th of September from the Chief Financial Secretary to the Treasury, and he wrote back to me with a letter full of platitudes that said, as early as legally possible, and once our EU commitments allow, and we have raised this issue with European counterparts on multiple occasions and expect the EU Commission to bring forward a legislative proposal as soon as once agreed we'll be able to bring in some legislation. These platitudes are not good enough, Conference. And if the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and the UK government can't deal with tampons and VAT, how the hell are they going to get us through Brexit? So we need to keep pushing on this, and I'm not prepared to let this issue lie. And I don't believe that if we had a female Chancellor, and there have been no female Chancellors, that a woman would have let this issue go. It's not a priority for the men in power, so the women and all of us here in this room have to keep pushing on this issue. Please support the resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. Gillian, I think Jerry has a point of order he wishes to make before. I'm sorry, Conference, I have to take a point of order, at least hear it, until I decide whether it's competent or not, Jerry, and I hope it is.
Very fairly, a point of order during the debate on a resolution which will be passed unanimously, including myself. But I would ask the convener to rule that it is not possible for this conference to pass it unanimously without at least a warning, I suggest, from the president of the party, who is present, I think, that any legislation to enact this proposal, with which I happen to agree, will be struck down by the European Court of Justice.
Right, Jerry, that isn't actually
In the
a
same
point
way,
of order.
in the same way.
Thank you, Jerry. It's not a point of order. It's an opinion. It is not a point of order. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. And for the media watching, that's not a stage invasion. That's part of the process of SNP conference. Thank you, Jerry. And we return to the resolution. Gillian Martin, MSP, to speak in favour of the resolution, to be followed by Morag O'Dea, who will also speak in favour of the resolution. Gillian Martin.
Man, I feel I've arrived. I just got filibustered by Jerry Fisher. Anyway, conference, the word of our conference is progress. Whilst we are asking for a tiny bit of UK government progress in eliminating VAT on period products across the UK, the Scottish Government are working to completely eliminate period poverty. As Kirsty mentioned, in 2016, my friend and the outgoing, fantastic political education convener, Julie Hepburn, and I took the idea of free access to period products to the SNP National Council. And don't let anyone tell you that when you go with a resolution that nothing will ever happen to it, because this story proves that it will. We spoke of an S card, which could be presented in the same way that a supermarket's points card could be redeemed, something that wouldn't single anyone out, wouldn't erode anyone's dignity, something that anyone could choose to use when they needed it. And let's face it, most of us would not actually choose to use one if we can afford to pay. But for those who needed it, it would be there. We're still campaigning for that to be a reality, but my goodness, we've made progress. Just over a year later from that National Council, and many meetings later, our First Minister announced in a programme for government just a few weeks ago that no one accessing education should ever need to miss any part of that education again because they can't afford tampons, pads, or a cup. We are delivering free access to period products in every Scottish school, university and college. Progress. And we're still not finished. Our Cabinet Secretary for Communities, Social Security and Equalities, Angela Constance, is piloting a project at Seafine in Aberdeen which will give anyone who needs it free access to period products. Anyone, no explanation needed. We're hopeful in completion of this pilot will be a step closer to figuring out a mechanism where we can give anyone, regardless of their circumstances, access to the products that we believe is a human right, not a luxury. Those who will routinely go without because they prioritise feeding their children over their own needs. Those who miss school because they will bleed with no protection. Those who will have no access to their own money or are kept from accessing these products that will allow them to leave the house because of controlling and coercive partners. Those who are homeless and on the streets who right now have to rely on rolling up rags, socks, toilet papers, newspapers, you name it, in order to get through that week. And for those who say we can't afford it, I say this: we cannot afford not to do this. Period poverty is a health issue, an education issue, a human rights issue, and a qualities issue. Its effects are largely hidden, but they're there, and they cost us much more than can ever be quantified. I support this resolution. I salute Kirsty Blackman and Alison Thewlis, who've been battling with the UK government for years on this, but I'm not prepared to wait for any UK government progress on VAT. We are eliminating period poverty at source and at home in Scotland, and that's progress. Support the resolution.
Thank you, Gillian. I call Morag O'Dea to speak in favour of the resolution, to be followed by Kirsty Jarius, who will also speak in favour of the resolution. And Morag's a first-time speaker at conference. Welcome, Morag.
Like many of the people in the room, this resolution means nothing to me. I'm only an honorary member of the Youth SNP. I'm too old for sanitary products, and touch wood, I don't need the incontinence ones yet. But I'm fed up with this discussion. I've been doing this discussion now for 30 years almost. Roughly 30 years ago, I was a delegate in Glasgow at the STUC Women's Conference. And on the agenda was scrap VAT on sanitary products. And I was quite pleased because I'd just gone back to them after a 9-month gap, which is why I remember the date. And I thought, this is wonderful. This is going to affect my life. And we passed it unanimously. And I waited, and I waited, and absolutely nothing happened. I went to various other conferences. The same motion came up, and nothing really happened. But we've got our SNP youth. I don't want them to wait for another 30 years. So don't only vote for this, but please, can we make it happen this time? Thank you.
Thank you, Morag. And finally, Kirsty. And welcome, Kirsty, who's another first-time speaker at party conference.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks to the SNP, Scottish Government, women on low incomes can receive free sanitary products. But unfortunately, the UK Tory Government have not followed in the Scottish Government's footsteps and are actually still charging VAT on these products. Conference. Some women are using food banks in order to get access to sanitary products. They're not guaranteed to receive these products when they receive their parcel. This may mean that they are travelling unnecessarily. Conference, we should not be seeing women using food banks in this day and age in order to receive sanitary products. The UK government have got the power to follow in the Scottish Government's footsteps, so why aren't they? As a result of women being unable to pay for their sanitary products, some are actually reusing these products, which is affecting their health. The UK government must now take steps to protect the most vulnerable women in society. In turn, this is affecting young women's education, because they're having to miss out on 5 full school days per month, which is approximately 60 days per year, which is actually 360 days while young women are going through the high school process. This is not acceptable in this day and age. It's not only affecting young women, it's affecting them while they're going to college and when they're going to work, which could in turn mean they're losing out on some income. Conference, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate organisations such as Glasgow Airport for providing free sanitary products. Sanitary products are not something which women want, however, they're something which we need, such as food, shelter and water. Receiving sanitary products is a human right, so why is the UK government refusing vulnerable women in society this right? Conference, please support the resolution.
Thank you, Kirsty. Well done, Kirsty, on your first, I'm sure, of what will be many speeches at party conference. Well done. There are no cards in against. Kirsty Blackman, would you like to waive your right to sum up, or would you like you waive your right to sum up? No cards in against. Can I ask, conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is. Thank you very much. And we now turn to Resolution 19, Mental Health in the Workplace. and that will be proposed by Tony Giuliano and seconded by Kelly Given. Welcome, Tony.
Good afternoon, delegates. Around 1 in 4 of us will develop a mental health problem over the course of our lives. If that isn't you, chances are it'll be a friend, a colleague, or someone you love. Mental health problems are all around us, often invisible, but real. Yes, the stereotypes of the past are starting to crumble, but too often mental ill health is still perceived as always being severe, acute, and irrecoverable. And conference, that's simply not true. Each and every one of us has mental health and physical health. They are equally critical to our well-being, and it's time we started looking after them both in equal measure. Delegates, this year, World Mental Health Day focuses on employment. Work provides income, status, and a sense of achievement. It gives people a social network, preventing loneliness and isolation. It provides a structure to our lives. Good jobs support good mental health. Rewarding jobs that provide a decent wage and security are instrumental to supporting our well-being. Bad employment, jobs that are insecure with low wages and poor working conditions, can exacerbate and often create a mental health condition. And it is no coincidence that the highest rates of suicide in Scotland and across the UK are among the lowest paid workers with insecure jobs. And I want to say this, 0-hour contracts that keep people in low-paid work because they're desperate to keep a roof over their head is something the UK government should be utterly ashamed of. Conference, the Scottish Government's new mental health strategy makes a clear commitment to work with employers to improve the mental well-being of their workforce. Mental ill health costs employers in Scotland over $2 billion every year. So it's in everyone's interests to get behind a prevention agenda and create the right working environments for people to thrive. Earlier today, the Mental Health Foundation at our conference kicked off the debate about what could be done differently in our workplaces. We need employers that assess the impact of workload on people's health, line managers who are trained to offer support when it's needed, bosses willing to make reasonable adjustments for people who are struggling to keep them in work and avoid the poverty trap, chief executives that lead from the front by being open about their own experiences. Ultimately, conference, we need a culture shift in our workplaces. Around half of Scottish workers choose not to disclose a mental health problem to their bosses for fear of discrimination or losing their job. But possibly the most telling statistic is that almost half of Scottish workers would rather tell their boss that they had a physical problem than phone in sick with panic attacks or stress. I've been through depression. I've lived with anxiety. I know how much easier it is to pick up the phone and say that I've got a migraine instead and can't make it to work that day, hoping that way that I wouldn't be judged. Never once did I admit to an employer about a mental health problem. But what I have done is I've told every single one of you here today. It's not easy, conference, but let me tell you, attitudes must change. So on World Mental Health Day, let's reflect on what steps we can all take to look after our own mental well-being, and let's send a strong message, not only to employers but right across Scotland, that people with mental health problems are an asset to society, that it's okay to not always feel okay, and above all, that talking about it, talking about how we feel, is the most powerful thing we can do. In our schools, in our workplaces, in our care homes, in our health service, in our prisons, let's shatter the silence on mental health and build a more resilient Scotland. because the true measure of success of any nation is above all else the health and well-being of its people. Thank you. Support the resolution.
Thank you, Tony. And to second is Kelly Given, to be followed by Alan Bithell, who will speak in favour of the resolution. I don't see Kelly. So can I take Alan Bithell to second the resolution? To be followed by Maureen Watt, who will speak in favour of the resolution. And Alan's a first-time speaker at conference.
Conference, I bring you a revelation today that you may not have heard about. Theresa May certainly hasn't heard it. Talking on Radio 4's Today programme last Tuesday, she spoke about those with mental health. Well, here's a message that needs to get out. We all have mental health. Just as we have physical health, it needs to be looked after in just the same way. We have all kinds of health and safety regulation with the aim of making the workplace a safer place. Why the workplace should not be as safe for our mental health as it is for our physical health, I do not know. As someone who suffers poor mental health, what I do need is good management. I don't need the workplace to be somewhere made extra special, soft and fluffy to comfort me. I go there to work. It's good management. Management that considers my needs. As once happened to me in a recent job, I turned up for my shift at 6 in the morning to find it had been extended for 2 hours. I contacted my manager. I can't do an extra 2 hours today. I have a counselling appointment at 2. I'd arranged it for outside my working hours, as any normal person would do. He said it wasn't important, and that if I didn't work the extra time, I'd be subject to disciplinary action. Who needs that? That kind of management doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anyone give their best in a job. I know the things that damage my mental health and the things that help it. Completing a task for someone who appreciates it is a huge boost for my mental health. Work can be a great therapy. When going to work means facing constant criticism and threats from your line manager, you'll never be able to give your best, regardless of the state of your mental health. In my bad times, I have some very convincing arguments that I should not be allowed to continue to exist. Going to work should not mean having these uncontrollable thoughts reinforced. I bring with me some usable skills and an eagerness to work. In doing the work, I am fighting against my brain trying to destroy me. I fight very hard. The fact that that means a lot of work gets done for my employer is a secondary benefit. Work has the power to help me or destroy me. It will do for me one or the other. To make me safe and get the best I can does not mean making these adjustments to the workplace so it's soft, fluffy and comfortable, but just the good management. Employing somebody with a mental health condition is not something to be feared. I know a lot of people with such conditions. They're some of the nicest, most helpful people you could meet. Of course, being like this, they do not make the headlines. I've yet to meet the axe-wielding psychopath I hear so much about. I'm starting to believe it's a mythical creature. Many are like myself and will bring a massive commitment to the work they do. I opened with the revelation that we all have mental health. Right now, I don't know if I should be angry or discouraged that Theresa May's careless reference to those with mental health has been repeated from this stage. Therefore, I leave you with an additional challenge. Of course, I want you to support this resolution, but I want much more of you. I want you all to continue supporting the resolution after convention, as we go back to our daily lives. Mental health stigma is embedded in our everyday language. Support this revolution not only by voting for it, but by weeding out the stigma we hardly notice in our daily speech. In the words of Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And Maureen Watt to speak in favour of the resolution. Maureen Watt, MSP, is of course Minister responsible. So welcome, Maureen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, delegates, and good afternoon, conference. This time last year, I was delighted to stand in front of you as the first ever dedicated Minister for Mental Health in the whole of the UK, and that was up to the foresight of the First Minister in putting mental health at the top of this government's agenda. Since then, I have published the Mental Health Strategy, which has 40 actions in it. Now, over the 10 years of that strategy, we want to make sure that all of these actions are implemented. But also, over the lifetime of that strategy, we want to make sure that there is parity of esteem between physical and mental health. That is enshrined in legislation, but it doesn't actually happen on the ground. So that is incumbent on all of us to help reduce the stigma. We know that people self-stigmatize, and we know that stigma still exists. But as the previous speaker said, it is incumbent on all of us to make sure that we help to reduce the stigma. We also want anyone with a mental health problem to look after and make sure that health professionals help them look after their physical and mental health. Because the inequality of people with poor mental health dying 15 to 20 years earlier than those with good physical and mental health is a health inequality that this government is determined to eradicate. Earlier today on World Mental Health Day, I was delighted to take forward Action 14 of the Mental Health Strategy, which is to work with NHS 24 to develop its unscheduled mental health services to complement locally based services. I gave NHS 24 an extra £500,000 to develop these services so that telephone services will be there for people who need them on an unscheduled care basis. People will be assessed at the end of a call. People will be given CBT at the end of the call. We also want to develop more online services and computerised CBT, and this extra money will help NHS 24 develop that. And if you haven't been on it, make sure you visit NHS Inform website, which gives a huge range of advice on mental health services. And earlier today at lunchtime, I was delighted to join the Mental Health Foundation on talking about mental health in the workplace. As we said, Action 36 of the strategy is to work with employers on how they can act to protect and improve mental health and support employees experiencing poor mental health. I'm very conscious that the Scottish Government, not just me in the Health Directorate, but across directorates and whom I work very closely with to ensure that mental health is a thread through all the work we do in government. I'm very conscious that employers and employees too have a great job to do in this. I could wax lyrical about it for ages, but I know the convener is not going to let me do that. So can I just support the motion? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Maureen. I do have time to take one further speaker, so I call Colin Brown. He'll be a first-time speaker at conference. Colin, if you can come forward. And just as I say that, we have 3 topicals, one on Rohingya, one on mosquito devices, and one on fracking. And the text will appear on the large screens. And if you wish to speak in the topical resolutions, please ensure that you have submitted a card. And they've, of course, also been circulated on the conference app. But please welcome first-time speaker, Colin Brown.
Thank you, Convener. Comrades, I rise to support this motion. Great as it is, it doesn't quite go far enough for me, I have to say. This is an excellent motion, and it does mention one excellent little bit here about depression being the largest cause of illness and disability worldwide. Now, that's quite an astonishing statement to make here. I want you to go back to your various unions and your branches and see what we can do. This motion doesn't actually ask the government to do anything in particular. It's a very self-congratulating motion, and all the better for that, I think. I used to be a member of 3 different unions. I am now a member of one, Equity, the Performing Arts Union. And a few years ago, the East of Scotland branch of Equity published an excellent little report about mental health. I would suggest to you that Equity is a slightly unique union in that although there are 44,000 of us performing artists UK-wide, at any given time, between 85% and 90% of us are out of work. So for every actor who has a paid sinecure job in River City or Taggart, there are the ghost of 9 actors standing behind them. A few years ago, the East of Scotland Equity Branch published an excellent report, as I have said, and it addressed a lot of things that we in Equity are known for. For instance, stage fright. Now, I am sure that there are a lot of speakers that have already come up here that have attempted to speak and have suffered from stage fright. It's not to be laughed at, basically, although a lot of people do take the laugh out of it. The British Association for Performing Arts Medicine a few years ago published an excellent report called I Can't Go On. Now, that's a wee pun there, isn't it? Because it does mention a few of the things, the prognosis that I'm sure those of you who have already been up here this week will have suffered from, if that's the right word. Sweating, especially in the hands, dry mouth, heart beats faster, breathing gets faster and heavier, dizziness, a sick feeling, although actual vomiting is less common, and the urge to keep rushing to the loo. I am reminded about Enoch Powell here. I bet you thought you'd never hear that. Enoch Powell famously said that when he had a speech to deliver, he always made sure that he had a full bladder because that concentrated his mind wonderfully. I'm sorry to put that image into your head, but he did say that. I wonder how many people actually...
Sorry, Colin, you were well over time, but you have to leave us with that image. I'm sorry. Well, you have done. They can't hear you, but I'll say, he's saying support the motion. There aren't any cards in against. Tony, can you waive your right to sum up? I think you will. Thank you very much. So can I ask conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is. Thank you very much. We now turn to Resolution 20, Tackling Job Insecurity and Unfair Employment Practices, and that will be proposed by Stuart MacDonald MP and seconded by Jenny Ruth MSP.
Thank you, Derek. I never thought I'd follow the image of Enoch Powell's full bladder, but there are always many firsts at conference, I suppose. At conference, before we start on the substance of the motion before you, we should take a moment to reflect on the fact that this debate takes place against a backdrop of 2,000 people today learning that they're going to lose their jobs across the UK working for BAE Systems. Highly skilled technicians, engineers, and other parts of the vital workforce being shattered with that crushing news that their livelihood is to lose their income. And although the losses in Scotland are extremely minimal, I ask you, conference, to show those workers your solidarity this afternoon. And conference, the debate on job security, or rather job insecurity, is an important one. I want you to imagine that you've applied for a job, you've gone to the interview, you've gone through the full half hour, or however long it might take you, and you're asked to come in and demonstrate your skills, to show that you can do the things you've said you can do, whether it be make a coffee, carry 3 plates at the same time, or maybe put a cocktail together. You're asked not to do that for 1 or 2 hours, or even 1 or 2 days. But you're asked to do that unpaid, no guarantee of work, for 40 hours. An entire working week in which you don't know at the end of it whether you will secure the work you've applied for, and you certainly won't be getting any money. That was the exact case that a constituent of mine had brought to my attention, that a company operating right across the UK was doing here in Glasgow. And the practice, as everybody knows it, is an unpaid trial shift. And I'm seeing lots of heads nodding because you know what that is, because the chances are if you haven't done one, you'll know somebody that has. And they are being used to exploit people right across the UK. And worse than that, sometimes unpaid trial shifts are actually being offered where there actually is no job to fill. Sometimes they just have companies will offer a succession of candidates in and out the door just to plug staffing shortages in one particular post. I don't mean the Scottish Labour leadership. But if we can help them, then perhaps, conference, we should. And conference, we've talked a lot here over the years about things like 0 hours contracts, about the dignity that people deserve in work, and we are a leading voice in that respect. Believe me. So when companies say to workers like Uber drivers that you're not employees and you don't deserve the protection of the law, and when the court says, I'm sorry, Uber, you've got that wrong, the message that comes from us has to be that they are workers and they deserve to be treated like workers. And conference, on that, I want to congratulate the campaign Better Than Zero, who have done so much work to highlight the insecurities and indignity that people go through, particularly in the gig economy. But on this issue of unpaid trial shifts, you heard our Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, mention that I've brought forward a bill in the House of Commons that would ban unpaid trial shifts. And the challenge to Labour and the Conservatives is clear. If we're going to end this, I need them to work with me. I need as many members of Parliament, not just from Scotland, but across the UK, to turn up on the 18th of March so that we can end this horrid practice in the workplace. Because, conference, day in, day out, people are still, in 2017, having to make and remake the case for ordinary workers' rights and respect. It's about time we started closing these arguments. If you put in a fair day's shift, if you apply your skills and your labour, you should be getting paid for it. No ifs and no buts. you should get paid as the law says. So, conference, I ask you not just to support this resolution, but for those of you living in constituencies that are not represented by SNP MPs, please lobby your Member of Parliament, get your friends to do the same thing, and ask them to back the bill to ban unpaid trial shifts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. And Jenny Gilruth, MSP, to second the resolution, to be followed by Keith Brown. Jenny Gilruth.
Thank you, Conference. I have known Stuart MacDonald since I joined the SNP a decade ago. I am proud to call him my friend. And I am proud that he is holding the UK Government to account through his unpaid work trials bill. Because, delegates, in a civilised society, no one should ever be expected to work for free. In May this year, the Prime Minister claimed she would lead a party for the workers of Britain. And yet, between 2007 and 2015, the UK was the only big advanced economy where wages shrunk whilst our economy boomed, where the rich got richer and the workers got poorer. A Britain which employs 1.7 million workers on 0 hours contracts. Is anyone really surprised? Job insecurity is, after all, a subject close to the Prime Minister's heart. But I want to be serious. Paid, meaningful employment is important. Here we are, delegates, on the banks of the Clyde, the heart of the shipbuilding industry for generations, where Jimmy Reid famously took a stand against job insecurity and won. A rat race is for rats. We are not rats. That is what unpaid work does to people. It degrades them, it devalues them, it grinds them down. The SNP in government is building a social security system which puts dignity and respect at its heart. Contrast that with the Tories' benefit reforms, reforms which are so inhumane they have been condemned by the United Nations. We know that if Scotland is to progress, then we cannot rely on Westminster's Tories. We never could. We cannot wait for Westminster's Tories to look after the vulnerable. They never have. And Scotland certainly cannot trust the Labour Party to defend workers' rights. That's the party whose leadership contest is between a guy whose family business doesn't recognise trade unions versus another guy who doesn't believe that Scotland should be in charge of employment law, whose real leader thinks if Scotland wants a different Brexit, then we'd need our own legal system. The party who blocks the devolution of employment law through the Smith Commission. So, whether it's bumptious Boris or gibbering Jeremy, the result is always the same. Conference, 10 years ago, I joined the Scottish National Party. 10 years ago, our message of hope and aspiration resonated with my generation and beyond. 10 years ago, we broke convention and formed Scotland's first ever minority government. In government, we continue to champion fair working practices. We were the first in the UK to become a living wage employer. We refused to directly employ anyone on a 0 hours contract. We introduced the Scottish Business Pledge. Scotland's workers have our respect. They demand dignity, and they deserve a decent wage. Delegates, unpaid work trials are a symbol of something far more sinister. They represent everything this party has always stood against. Let's consign them to history and send a clear message to Westminster. The SNP will always stand with Scotland's workers. Delegates, support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And to speak in favour of the resolution, I call Keith Brown, MSP, who's the Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Jobs and Fair Work. Keith.
Delegates, if I could mention one or two of the other parts of the motion which are about jobs, and it's worth bearing in mind that despite what you might read in some newspapers, we have some real successes in terms of jobs. We have the second lowest unemployment rate on record. We have the highest employment rate on record. We have the highest amount of foreign direct investment of any part of the UK outside of London. We have the highest number of firms ever in Scotland. Now, these are all real successes which are testimony to the work of many people in the Scottish Government and elsewhere. But it's also true to say, as this motion does, we do have people who are paid less than a living wage, who are paid 0 hours contracts, Even if it is the case, there are less of those in Scotland. Indeed, Scotland has, of all the 4 countries of the UK, the lowest number of people being paid 0 hours contract and the highest number of people being paid the living wage. But that still means there is more for us to do. And we have had some success, not least in terms of getting companies to sign up to the living wage. The point about the living wage is quite simple. There's 2 reasons why people should be doing it. There's a moral case and an economic case. The moral case is, of course, it's right that somebody should be paid a wage that they can live on. That hardly needs to be said. But it's also in the interest of the economy, because if you have people on the living wage, they're not putting their money away in foreign bank accounts, they're paying it to live on. And that means it goes back into the economy to buy goods and services locally, so it's good for the economy. 2 important reasons why the living wage is so important. And what is interesting, and Jenny's referred to this, is a hypocrisy that we see in the Labour Party, who demand every other week in the Scottish Parliament that we insist on companies paying a living wage, when they were the ones that denied us, through the Smith Commission, from having the power to make it a legal requirement to have the living wage. That is sheer hypocrisy on the part of the Labour Party. And I think we kind of expect the undermining of workers' rights from the Conservatives. It's just what the Conservatives do. But if you think it is utter hypocrisy of Labour to have a go at the Scottish Government on a living wage, having voted, as I say, to prevent the Scottish Government having the powers to make it a legal requirement, what do you say about a Labour MSP who wanted to prevent us having that power, who says that his family firm doesn't pay the living wage because it's not mandatory? Now, if you think about that for a second, we have never said it's just the case that we want to be able to tell firms to pay the living wage. We think firms should pay the living wage because it's the right thing to do. You shouldn't have to be told to pay the living wage, especially for a Labour MSP. Now, I haven't mentioned his name, and I don't intend to. I don't think we should make this personal, but I do think I would promise not to mention this again in the Scottish Parliament if the company concerned agrees to be one of the 1,000 living wage employers and pays all of its employees the living wage. There's a challenge to the particular MSP that I'm talking about. So, delegates, your SNP government is working very hard to make sure that people are paid the living wage, to make sure that we bear down on 0 hours, to make sure that we help those who are in insecure employment. Those are the things you'd expect to hear from an SNP in government. But I think it's equally impressive that our MPs, like Stuart MacDonald, are taking the fight to Westminster, where the power, unfortunately, still rests. So I would ask you to continue to support the SNP government in what it does, obviously, but ask you to support Stuart MacDonald and his bill and support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. There are no cards in against. Stuart, would you like to sum up or waive your right to sum up? Thank you. Can I ask conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? Thank you. And we're just reaching the topical resolutions now. We have 3 to take. And just before we do, can we play a short video in relation to the first topical resolution? Ranga.
Look into these faces, into these eyes. These are terrified, desperate people. They have nothing. No home, no medicine, no food. In little more than a month, over 500,000 Rohingya people have been forced to flee for their lives, crossing the border into this cramped, crowded, and now insanitary corner of Bangladesh. Their communities are being torn apart by terrible violence in Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. It's a humanitarian crisis on a catastrophic scale, created with bewildering speed. Imagine what it would be like to face fear on this scale. Your home's burning, your relatives and friends killed. All you can do is run, but if you survive this ordeal, what happens next? How do you go on surviving? These traumatized people need help now, urgently, and we can give them that help. The flight of these Rohingya is the largest mass refugee movement in the region in decades. They have escaped the burning of their villages, only to face pitilessly dreadful conditions here. Many of those arriving in Bangladesh are women and children. It's estimated more than 300,000 people don't even have shelter. Over 250,000 have no clean water. Many people need urgent medical attention, but there are no large hospitals nearby. The risk of disease and infection is alarming. This is why the Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, and its 13-member charities need our help immediately. You can donate online at dec.org.uk by calling 0370 60 60 610, by texting CRISIS to 70000 to give £5, or by sending a cheque to this address. £30 can provide emergency shelter for one family. £50 can provide 10 families with hygiene essentials. £100 can provide food for 2 families for a month.
One of those who fled wrote a letter to the world. "We are so hungry," he said. "We have no shelter, medicine, clothes, food. Our babies are going to die. This is why we need your donations, now."
There is no time to lose. These desperate people urgently need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Conference. And please support the appeal. On the topical resolution, it will be proposed by Alistair Allen, MSP, and seconded by Bill Mills. And of course, Alistair Allen is the Minister for International Development in the Scottish Government. Welcome, Alistair.
Well, thank you, Convener, and of course that film speaks for itself, but before I attempt to try to speak about it and about the issues in it, can I ask Conference to give a particularly warm welcome to a particularly important and special visitor we have at this year's conference, and that is Gonzalo Vargas Llosa, who is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Conference, as you've heard in that film, it is now believed that almost 500,000 people from Burma's Rakhine state have been left without homes, shelter, sanitation, without reliable sources of food in many cases, without anything in many cases but the clothes that they stand up in. Now, it's a tragedy, and that much goes without saying, and it's a tragedy on a scarcely imaginable scale. But be in no doubt, Conference, it's not an accident. And as is now obvious to the world, these are not people who have been subjected to a natural disaster. These are people whose villages have been destroyed and who have had to flee for their families' lives. Now, the Scottish Government has sought to help in what modest ways we can. The First Minister has announced that the Scottish Government will support the relief effort, and this week I was happy to be able to allocate that support to the work of a number of NGOs from Scotland. Conference Scotland will play its part in seeking to help meet some of the most basic needs of some of the world's most vulnerable people, and of that, Conference, I believe Scotland can be justly proud. But Scotland has a duty to speak up too, along with the rest of the world. A duty to call out what we are all witnessing for what it is, and we are not afraid to do that either. We are talking about people who have inalienable rights to life and dignity wherever they find themselves in the world. So they have a right to return to Burma, however difficult and unlikely that presently looks. They have a right to be helped in Bangladesh by the world's aid agencies. And if any of them were to end up as refugees on our shores, we will remember that refugees have rights around the world too. Conference, it is for the UK to determine what is done proactively to bring any group to the UK. But we heard earlier in conference about how Scotland has showed itself to be a warm-hearted place, welcoming of people who were driven from their homes in Syria. Conference, I believe that Scotland would show itself to be equally warm-hearted, equally respectful to anyone from Burma who arrived on our shores. Now, I read the words of Burma's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, what she said after these terrible events recently. Now, many of us in this hall will, I know, have respected and supported her in her many years of campaigning to move Burma away from arbitrary military rule. And it is therefore frankly astonishing how anyone of her international stature could make the speech that she recently did, or that the nearest that she could come to condemning the brutality that has been meted out to the Rohingya people was to say that she wanted to find out why it might be that some Rohingyas had left. If the government of Burma are stuck for an answer to that, they need only ask the UN Secretary General, because when he was asked if he thought what had happened to the Rohingya people represented ethnic cleansing, he said, "It's difficult to think of a better word for it." Conference, I don't have a better word for it, so support the resolution.
Thank you, Alistair. And Bill Mills to second the resolution. And Bill's a first-time speaker at conference. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Derek. Conference. The Rohingya Muslim community's plight didn't start yesterday. Having been deprived of citizenship under the 1982 citizenship law, members of that minority are prohibited from taking part in civil and political life. Banned from voting and holding office in Myanmar, to making matters worse, they live under dire economic circumstances that affect all aspects of everyday life. To be clear, what is happening in Myanmar represents a clear violation of Article 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It stipulates that the national government must protect and respect the human rights of everyone, regardless of their race, colour, sex, language, religious conviction, opinions, and origins. An estimated 2,000 Rohingya are arriving in Bangladesh every day. Aid agencies have warned of a malnutrition crisis, with over 281,000 people in Bangladesh in need of food, including 145,000 children under 5, with over 50,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women. Cholera is a risk, amid fears of disease spreading in the rain-drenched camps, where aid workers are trying to install sanitation systems and begin a vaccination campaign with over 900,000 doses of cholera vaccine being delivered this week. Aung San Suu Kyi's silence is inexcusable. Her refusal to condemn or even fully acknowledge the state-sponsored repression of her fellow countrymen and women, not to mention the violence meted out to them by Buddhist extremists, makes her part of the problem, not the solution. In a genocide, silence is complicity. To paraphrase an old saying, for evil to triumph, good women need only do nothing. Conference, the Rohingya people may be voiceless. We certainly aren't. Support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no cards in against. Can I ask, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is. And the next topical resolution on mosquito devices will be proposed by Michael Gibbons, to be seconded by Christina McKelvey, MSP. Welcome, Michael Gibbons.
Good evening, Conference. I don't think I can follow a debate like that, but I'm going to try. Conference, when I first heard about this issue, I was appalled. We currently allow for indiscriminate devices to be operated in our transport hubs, in our businesses, and in our communities. Machines built to deter young people from ever engaging in their local communities. Devices that have proven harmful effects on their health and well-being of young people. Please do note that, delegates, that these machines don't distinguish between a 19-year-old committing a crime and infants that don't have a voice. A ringing tone that has been described by various members as torturous, the devices themselves have been classed as a gross and unlawful breach of young people's human rights. I'm delighted that our party has not resigned itself to the casual acceptance that other parties would do so. The UN has spoken out against them, as has the Scottish Commissioner for Children and Young People. Why we continue to allow these devices that breach the European Human Rights Convention is beyond my comprehension. Thank you very much for your time. Please back the motion.
Thank you, Michael. And to second, Christina McKelvey, MSP.
Thank you very much, Derek. Conference, I was shocked to hear when I was dealing with some antisocial behaviour at Hamilton Central train station that ScotRail had fitted a mosquito device with no consultation, no discussion, nothing. These devices, as you've heard, have been criticised openly by the Council of Europe as a breach to young people's human rights. They are indiscriminate because they don't discriminate. Young people can hear them. I can hear them. So young people can hear them as well. Babies can hear them. They make babies cry, and I've heard them. But most worryingly, they interfere with the hearing of people who have autism. And if you're already facing the challenge of being a person with autism, if you're a parent of a young person with autism, to have to then take the train from Hamilton Central is not an option. I'm glad to hear the one at Hamilton's broken. They used it once. I want it removed. Conference, when I heard this, I met recently with the leadership of the Scottish Youth Parliament and with the Children's Commissioner to look at ways that we could work together in order to do something about these devices. So I'm making a call today for you to back that campaign. I'm making a call today to the Scottish Government to look at what they can do, whether they can regulate these devices, whether we can even have a registration scheme for these devices, because we have no idea where they are and where they're being used. And if we are to truly commit to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, as proposed by this government, something I'm incredibly proud of, then we should just go for a ban on these devices. I ask you to support the motion.
Thank you, Christina. There are no cards in against. Can I ask, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is, thank you. And we turn to our final topical resolution on fracking, and that will be proposed by Paul Wheelhouse, MSP, who's the Minister for Business, Innovation and Energy. Please welcome Paul Wheelhouse.
Thank you very much. Conference, the Scottish Government has taken a cautious, evidence-led approach to the issue of exploitation of unconventional oil and gas in Scotland. We've ensured stakeholders and the people of Scotland have had the opportunity to participate. Not only did we undertake one of the most far-reaching investigations into unconventional oil and gas of any government, we undertook a 4-month public consultation earlier this year as well. Our decision on fracking was undertaken not solely based on public opinion, as some ill-informed Tory opponents would have you believe. Instead, we've considered the context of our longer-term ambitions for energy and the environment, the needs of the Scottish economy, and of course our vital climate change responsibilities. Now, while we embarked on an ambitious low-carbon transition for our economy, a strong and vibrant domestic offshore oil and gas industry can and must play a positive role in our future energy system, given it provides 3/4 of our current energy needs, and we have strongly supported the sector and the courageous men and women who work in the sector. Our programme for government includes a commitment to introduce a new climate change bill led by Rosanna Cunningham, which will set even more ambitious climate targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we have a moral responsibility to tackle climate change and an economic responsibility to prepare Scotland for new low-carbon opportunities. Our consultation received more than 60,000 valid responses, and while it wasn't a referendum itself, and we said that from the start, it provided very clear messages, with 99% opposed to the development of any unconventional oil and gas industry in Scotland. Crucially, substantive responses from the 13 local authority areas containing the former shale oil and gas fields and coal fields that were most likely to be affected were overwhelmingly opposed. These areas include much of Greater Glasgow, Edinburgh and the Central Belt, and amongst the most densely populated areas of our country. There was no social licence for this new industry. We've not taken the process or the decision lightly, and in reviewing the scientific and economic research, I had particular concern over the inability to be certain on whether or not there would be health impacts. Our statutory advisors on climate change targets, the Committee on Climate Change, concluded unconventional oil and gas extraction in Scotland would make meeting our existing targets far more challenging. They also concluded that significant additional emissions from production of fracking, additional equivalent emissions to the impact of around 250,000 additional cars each year, and possibly more, would need to be offset through reductions in emissions elsewhere in the Scottish economy. The Tories and some other Daily Mail letter writers would have you believe we are missing out on a bonanza. Well, colleagues, economists at KPMG concluded the economic impact of an unconventional oil and gas industry in Scotland under their central development scenario, the most likely one, taking account of likely planning constraints, would add just 0.1% annually to Scotland's GDP. KPMG estimated such activity would in total and at peak support just 1,400 jobs, including all direct employed in the industry, their supply chain, and the effect of wages and spending in the wider economy. And that's not to be sniffed at. Nobody would turn down jobs, but by comparison, there are more than 100,000 people working today in the North Sea oil and gas industry, which makes up 6.5% of our economy. While I'm sure the industry would be well regulated, it's our responsibility as a government to make a decision we believe is in the national interest. That is for the best of the people of this country as a whole. Any responsible government must be confident the choices it makes will not compromise health and safety or cause unacceptable damage to the environment in which we live. And where we cannot be confident of these points, conference, we must adopt the precautionary principle. Taking all of this into account and balancing the interests of our environment, our economy, public health, and the opinion of the people of Scotland, very importantly, we have made clear that we will not support fracking in Scotland. Now, the Scottish Parliament awaits the transfer of licensing powers promised by the UK Government and legislated for in the Scotland Act 2016. These were promised for February, they didn't emerge, and we've yet to see them progressed by the UK Government. The licensing regime currently takes place under an EU hydrocarbons licensing framework, and this is just one of the 111 areas in the list provided by the UK Government that it seeks to unilaterally grab back for Whitehall as a result of Brexit. This would be utterly unacceptable, conference, and the UK Government must not attempt a power grab. The powers promised should be transferred to the Scottish Parliament as soon as possible. However, just to be clear, using our planning powers, our devolved planning powers, allows us to deliver a ban on fracking no matter what Westminster decides. And it mirrors our long-standing position in not supporting new nuclear power stations in Scotland as well. It also has the merit of being much quicker as a way of delivering our policy objective. However, in conclusion, unlike the gung-ho UK Tory government, which appears not to care about the views of those directly affected, we've taken time to research the subject and to consult the people of Scotland on the expert, independent, scientific advice we commissioned. Conference, the climate challenge is clear, and Scotland's people have spoken. Your SNP government has listened, and based on the evidence and the clear lack of social licence, we have decided that Scotland says no to fracking. Please support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. There's no cards in against, but I do require a formal seconder from the floor. Okay, right, calm down. That's plenty, thank you very much. So can I ask conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is, thank you very much. Now, without any further ado, please welcome the Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party, Angus Robertson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you. You're very kind. Well, many thanks for the opportunity to be able to speak at conference this afternoon about shaping the future. But I have to start with an apology because I know that a number of you will have read the preview in the excellent publication, The National, yesterday. Did you read that? Did you read The National? Good, good. Apparently, this session is sex, drugs, and Angus Robertson at the SEC. I don't want to disappoint you, but I'll try and make it exciting nonetheless. Can I begin by being totally unapologetic in recognizing that the last decade has been truly amazing for the Scottish National Party and truly groundbreaking for Scottish democratic life. It has been amazing. And we shouldn't forget just some basic facts about Scottish politics at the moment. The SNP has the most members in the Scottish Parliament. The SNP has the most members in the Westminster Parliament. And the SNP has the most councillors across this country. All things we should be very proud of. The good news doesn't stop there, though. The SNP has won the last 7 elections in a row at all levels: local government, Scottish Parliament, Westminster, and the European Parliament. Forgive me, I'd like to say that again, if that's okay. The SNP has won the last 7 elections in a row at every single level of our democratic life. And notwithstanding the disappointment of losing seats at the recent Westminster election, the SNP still won a majority of MPs in Scotland, something that neither the Tories nor the Labour Party could do across the UK. You don't hear this on television very often, but in contrast to that, the SNP returned the highest percentage of candidates from any party in Britain. And we should be very, very proud of that, especially when I consider that when I was first elected as an MP, there were 5 of us. There are now 7 times that number of SNP MPs across Scotland. And can I take the opportunity to put on record my appreciation to all of our parliamentarians at Westminster and also to colleagues who were not returned. Politics is a tough business, and it impacts not just on parliamentarians, but on their families, on staff, on our activists too. All of us, whether we were returned and those of us who were not, are committed to delivering Scottish independence as soon as we can. Because we have to save Scotland from this damaging, hard Brexit approach of Theresa May and her dysfunctional government. Can I just say it was hugely enjoyable to lead the SNP Westminster group from 2007 to 2017, especially when the group became the largest in the SNP's history. And I'm hugely appreciative to all colleagues who worked so hard to give Scotland and their constituents such a strong voice. And I would like to wish Ian Blackford and all of our excellent Westminster team well in the future. Because, of course, the SNP continues to be the third party at Westminster, which is a remarkable achievement. And remarkably, too, the SNP continues to have more members than all other parties added together in Scotland. And it gets better than that. The SNP now has more members than the Tories and the Liberal Democrats have across the UK as a whole. Just think about that for a second. The SNP has more members in a country of 5 million people than UK parties have across the 65 million people in the UK. It is remarkable. And for more than a decade, the SNP has led the Scottish Government with strong approval ratings from the public, while political opponents, no doubt, would wish this to be on the wane. The most recent opinion polls put the support for the SNP up, and with a double-digit lead over the Tories and over Labour. Think about that. Think about that for a second. 10 years into government, the SNP has a 17-point lead over Labour and more over the Tories, who are now in third place in Scotland. It's worth saying, just in passing, that by international standards, by international comparison, that puts the SNP amongst the most successful political parties anywhere in Europe. The SNP is polling better than the election-winning Christian Democrats of German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The SNP is polling better than the movement of France's President Emmanuel Macron. The SNP polls better than the governing parties of Italy, of Spain, of the Netherlands, and every single party in Scandinavia. And of course, we should not forget that at home, the SNP outpolls Labour, the Tories, and the Liberal Democrats. This amazing success is not just down to chance. It's come about because of the commitment and hard work by members like you here at the conference and those watching at home. SNP's success has come about because of its hard-working elected representatives and the great leadership from Nicola Sturgeon and before her from Alex Salmond. However understandable it is to have an ambition that we should not change a winning approach, we cannot simply rerun past campaigns and expect the same outcomes. And I think we have to reflect on the fact that for the first time in a decade, we do not face an imminent election. The next scheduled parliamentary polls will take place across Scotland in 2021. And this gives the SNP an unprecedented opportunity to involve our mass membership, to reach out to voters, to build our identified support, to raise campaign funds. And with the Scottish Social Attitudes Survey showing that an unprecedented 72% of 16 to 24-year-olds support Scottish independence, there is a new generation of young voters There is a new generation of young voters, and they should be natural SNP voters and potential new members. So we need to get out there and we need to work. And SNP branches and our constituency associations should be planning with this in mind. For the first time in recent memory, we will actually have the opportunity to get beyond voter identification. We must communicate even more effectively with voters about the issues that really matter to them. Let's reinforce support for the SNP. Let's convert the undecided. Let's boost the use of postal voting and signing up new members as well. And everybody has a part to play. Every member, every councillor, every MSP, every MP, MEP, and all of our local branches. And already, some local SNP organisations have been running training and planning sessions. Here at Conference, we've had a tremendous opportunity to attend training sessions, and if you haven't been able to do that, please do that now and at future conferences. There have been training sessions on campaigning, how the SNP wins elections, an introduction to SNP campaign techniques, on voter ID, on how to use Activate as well. And there are sessions for constituency and branch organisers and also for political education officers. And with so many new members, how many of you joined the SNP after 2014? Hands up. There's a lot of you. There's a lot of you. And I think it's really important that all of you have the opportunity to pick up all the best tips and tricks so we make sure we keep that winning record going that I was talking about. There's plenty of good practice going on around the country, and we must replicate these ideas everywhere. So can I appeal to each and every one of you at this conference, those here, those watching at home who are SNP members, please go back to your branches and constituencies and map out an organisational plan for the next years. Because, just wait for it, there are 1,300 and some days until the next Scottish parliamentary election, and there will also be a referendum on Scottish independence. There's some enthusiasm in the hall for that. But it's not just about us. It's about the wider yes movement. It's about everybody else who voted yes. It's about those who were not yet convinced. And we must be ready for that whenever it comes. And that means that we need to start right now. And we should be very proud that we have a progressive government in Scotland that is delivering for people right across the country. We're very proud of the different and better policies that are being pursued in Scotland. We are proud that the SNP is guaranteeing free education for students and that education is a top priority. We are delighted that the SNP is scrapping the public sector pay gap. We are pleased that the SNP is supporting businesses to grow the economy. We're happy to see record high levels of spending on the National Health Service and a record low in recorded crime. We are thankful that the SNP is pursuing world-class environmental standards and will ban fracking. And we are glad to see that the SNP is delivering fantastic infrastructure projects, including the Queensferry crossing, the motorway upgrades in central Scotland, and road improvements to the north, the northeast, and other parts of the country. We are so proud of this and so much more that the SNP is delivering in government under the fantastic leadership of Nicola Sturgeon. So please give the warmest of welcomes to our party leader, our First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon.
Thank you, Angus. Angus, I think you have just seen and heard just how much we all love you. Delegates, at the risk of tempting fate, I've come prepared. Derek, look after these for me. I told you he was a safe pair of hands. Friends, leading this party of ours is a great privilege, one enjoyed by just a few people in our history. Earlier this year, we lost one of our past leaders, a true giant of our movement. Gordon Wilson had the good fortune to be born in Govan in this city and to represent Dundee in the House of Commons, two great cities. When Gordon became leader of our party in 1979, he was one of just 2 SNP MPs at Westminster. Hopes of a new Scottish Parliament had just been scuppered. It was a tough time. But Gordon's commitment and political skill laid the groundwork for the SNP's future success. New members and younger voters may not know of Gordon's contribution, but it cannot be overstated. He kept the flame alive. He devoted his life to serving Scotland, and all of us owe him a deep debt of gratitude. Friends, the 3 years that I have been your leader can be described in many ways. Dull isn't one of them. We've had an EU referendum, a Scottish Parliament election, and not one but 2 Westminster campaigns. Different election contests for different parliaments, but with one common thread: victory for the SNP in all of them. Of course, we've had tough days along the way, and we learn from them. In June, we lost good colleagues from the House of Commons. Let us thank them today for their service. But let me offer a gentle reality check to our opponents. The SNP is polling at a higher level today than we were at this point in the honeymoon days after our 2007 win or our landslide in 2011. Our lead over the second-place party now is twice what it was in October 2008, and it is 5 times that of 2012. 10 years. Ten years into government, the verdict of the Scottish people is clearer than ever. They trust the SNP to deliver for Scotland, and we will work each and every day to retain that confidence. That applies here in this great city too. For decades, Glasgow has been run by Labour. In May, that came to an end. The cronies and time servers are out, fresh ideas, Susan Aitken and the SNP are in. And the difference is already clear. Under Labour, a bitter school janitor dispute rumbled on for months. Within weeks, it was resolved by the SNP. For years under Labour, women were denied the equal pay they are entitled to. Conference, it may take us a bit of time to fix Labour's mess, but I make this promise today. Fix it we will. The injustice suffered by low-paid women in this city will be put right. Equal pay for equal work denied for too long will be delivered by the SNP. As we fight for Scotland, our opponents, well, they fight each other. Scottish Labour is currently having its seemingly annual leadership election. Hypocrites, plotters, betrayers, barrel scrapers. No, that's not what we've been calling the candidates. That's what they've been calling each other. These days, ferrets in a sack distance themselves from Scottish Labour. And as for the Tories, well, the Tories are now back in third place in Scottish politics. And no wonder they are a policy vacuum, and the racism, misogyny and sectarianism within their ranks has been on full, ugly display. The disgusting views that have been expressed by too many Tory politicians have no place in public life. It is time Ruth Davidson found some backbone and kicked the racists and the bigots out of her party. Conference, the opposition in Scotland are all over the place. That's why, more than ever, the responsibility is on us, the SNP, to provide the good government that the people of our country expect and deserve. It is up to us to inspire the optimism that will drive Scotland forward, just as we have over the past decade. Our record is a strong one. More than £3 billion extra for the NHS. Almost 12,000 more health service staff, and the best performing emergency departments anywhere in the United Kingdom. Prescription charges abolished, and no privatisation of healthcare. Conference, as long as the SNP is in office, the NHS will always be in public hands. Now we are focused on vital reforms to shift more care and more resources into our communities. Tough decisions, yes, but necessary to make our NHS fit for the future. As in health, so too in education. In our schools, higher passes are up by almost a third. 10 years ago, just 12% of young people in this city left school with 3 hires. Today, it is 30% and it is rising. Now we are reforming school education, empowering head teachers and delivering more money direct to the classroom. Friends, I said we would close the attainment gap in our schools, and mark my words today, that is exactly what we are going to do. We have rebuilt the country's infrastructure too, from Lerwick Harbour in the north to the Borders Railway in the south, from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in the west, to the magnificent new Queensferry crossing in the east, and what an amazing feat of Scottish engineering that is. Look and travel across our wonderful country. The evidence is all around us. Improved rail connections, the length and breadth of Scotland, the new Aberdeen bypass, upgrading the M8, dualling the A9 and making it our first electric-enabled highway, super-fast broadband being extended to 100% of premises. Conference, we are connecting Scotland for the 21st century and beyond. The SNP is Scotland's party, and we are delivering for all of Scotland. This progress is good for Scotland, and it has another benefit. It shows the way for the rest of the UK. Last week, Theresa May said she would freeze tuition fees in England. She said they won't rise above £9,250 a year. Well, I can announce today that we will match that commitment. We will also freeze tuition fees, but we will freeze tuition fees at zero. Politicians elsewhere in the UK argue about whether fees should be frozen, reduced or abolished altogether. We settled that issue. We abolished tuition fees, we restored education as a right, and we now have record numbers of young people going to university. While others debate fees, we are focused on the next challenges: reforming student support, widening access. Our mission is this: to give young people from poorer backgrounds not just a better chance of going to university, but an equal chance of going to university. On housing too, one of the biggest issues of our time. While Westminster dithers and delays, Scotland is leading the way. When we came into office, council house building in Scotland had ground to a halt. The last Labour government built 6 council houses. Not 6,000 or 600 or even 60, just 6. All of them were in Shetland. And there's nothing wrong with that. So 8 years ago, we started a new generation of council house building. And since then, we've built 8,500 council houses. Overall, we're building new social housing at a faster rate than any other part of the UK. And now we are going further. Over this Parliament, we will deliver 50,000 more affordable homes. We're backing our commitment with record investment. £3 billion in this Parliament, almost 80% more than in the last 5 years. We've already set out how much money councils will be allocated each year, and we will not allow any of it to be diverted to other priorities. Let me make this clear to every council today. If you don't use all of your allocation to deliver new housing, we will take back the balance and give it to one that can. On money for housing, if you don't use it, you will lose it. Every last penny of our investment will go to delivering the new houses that people across this country need. That is our guarantee. Friends, over the past 10 years, we have led the way. We should be proud of what we have achieved. Our focus now is on the next 10 years and beyond. The world we live in today is changing at a faster pace than we have ever known. The challenges we face are generational. Our responses must be transformational. Last month, we unveiled our programme for government, a new programme for a new Scotland. It offers practical solutions to the daily concerns people have, and it aims to equip our country to prosper in a fast-changing world. As we look ahead, we face a choice. We can trail in the wake of the change that is coming, or we can choose to shape our own future. Let's resolve this today. We will not wait for others to decide for us. Let's resolve to put Scotland in the driving seat. A country that values education and cares for future generations will always be in the driving seat. At the heart of all we do is a determination to make Scotland the best place in the world to grow up. I've referred already to our school reforms, but it is what we do in the early years that matters most to the life chances of children. The new baby box really is a beautiful thing, not just for all the practical help it provides, or even the contact it promotes between pregnant mothers and midwives. It is beautiful because of what it says. All children are born equal. All children are valued. All children deserve the same start in life. But much as I love it, the baby box is not the most significant of our early years policies. Our expansion of nursery education is. It is truly transformational. Currently, we deliver around 16 hours of early education and childcare a week. That's already an expansion. But it means some parents still face a struggle to find and fund the childcare they need to allow them to work. We are going to change that. By 2020, we will deliver 30 hours a week for every 3- and 4-year-old and eligible 2-year-old across our country. It will give children the best possible start in life. It will free parents to find work. And each month, it will save families around £350 on the costs of childcare. That is the kind of real practical help that young parents need. You know, often when I talk about this policy, I'm asked, sometimes sceptically, if we will really be able to fund it properly. Well, today, we put our money where our mouth is. Over the past few months, we have undertaken detailed work to assess the investment needed. Right now, we invest around £420 million a year. Conference, I can announce today that by the end of this Parliament, that will double to £840 million a year. That is a commitment unmatched anywhere else in the UK, and it is the best investment we can make in Scotland's future. Every child matters. That includes those who grow up in care. Last year at our conference, I set out plans for a fundamental review of the care system. We want it to have love at its heart. We're also delivering practical help to level the playing field for care leavers, like full grants and guaranteed places for those with the grades to go to university. We want to make life a little bit easier for those leaving care. So I can announce today a further step. We will change the law so that all young care leavers are exempt from paying council tax. Friends, we can do all of these things because we are in government. We can make a difference every day with decisions that benefit this and future generations. The greatest responsibility of all that we owe to the next generation is to protect our planet. In 2009, we passed world-leading climate change targets and we met them. Next year, we will go further. A new climate change bill will set even more ambitious targets. We will meet our obligations under the Paris Accord. Conference, every industrialised country, large or small, must play its part to meet our collective duty to safeguard the environment. And let me be blunt about this. That applies just as much to the White House as it does to Butte House. Environmental campaigners recently described our programme for government as the greenest in the entire lifetime of the Scottish Parliament. We should be proud of that. In that programme, we committed to setting up low-emission zones in our 4 biggest cities by 2020 to improve the quality of the air that we breathe. The first of these will be in place by the end of next year, and I am very pleased to announce today that it will be located here in the city of Glasgow. Conference, we should also be proud of how we handle the difficult decisions involved in tackling climate change. We don't rush to judgment. We weigh up the evidence. We listen to the people, and we come to clear conclusions. Clear conclusions like this one. Fracking is now banned in Scotland. Tackling climate change is a moral obligation. It is often seen as a challenge, but it is also a massive opportunity. Scotland can be a world leader in the technologies that will drive forward the low-carbon economy of the future. Jobs and investment are there to be won, so we are leading by example. We will end the need for new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2032, 8 years ahead of the rest of the UK. An ambitious target, but one we know can be met. In 2007, we pledged that by 2020, 50% of the electricity we consume would come from renewable sources. Last year, ahead of schedule, we achieved 54%. That's great. That's great for our environment. And the lesson for our economy is this. By leading the way in using new technology, we send a message to the world that Scotland is the best place to develop it. Already, we're home to the largest tidal power array anywhere in the world. And next week, we will celebrate a new global first. Next week, I will officially open the world's largest floating wind farm, situated right here in Scotland off the coast at Peterhead. Conference. Our ambition is simple, to put ourselves in the driving seat of change. That is why we are establishing a new National Manufacturing Institute and increasing our investment in business research and development. And it's why we have made this decision too. At our conference in March, you asked us to set up a Scottish National Investment Bank, and in our programme for government, we committed to doing exactly that. The investment bank is about doing things differently for the new age. In our manifesto last year, we also pledged to explore the option of a new publicly owned energy company. The idea at its heart is simple. Energy would be bought wholesale or generated here in Scotland, renewable of course, and sold to customers as close to cost price as possible. No shareholders to worry about, no corporate bonuses to consider. It would give people, particularly those on low incomes, more choice and the option of a supplier whose only job is to secure the lowest price for consumers. Conference. We will set out more detail when we publish our new energy strategy, but I'm delighted to announce today that by the end of this Parliament, we will set up a publicly owned, not-for-profit energy company. We are taking real action in government now to meet the challenges of tomorrow. Responsible intervention to advance the collective good. We're also taking steps to empower communities, local ownership, more autonomy for our islands, and of course, land reform. Exactly 20 years ago, the people of Eigg bought their island from its owner, and so started Scotland's modern journey of land reform. That journey continues today. In recent months, Ulva, an island off the west coast of Mull, has sought permission to follow in Eigg's footsteps. If permission is granted, the residents can get on with raising the money needed. Conference, the Scottish Government has carefully considered the application, and I'm delighted to announce that we have today granted permission to the people of Ulva to bring their island into community ownership. Scotland's islands and rural communities attract visitors from across the globe. The tourist boom that our country is enjoying is great news. It means more jobs and more investment. But it can also mean pressure on transport, services and facilities, especially in rural areas. The Scottish Government is determined to help. So I'm also pleased to announce today that we will establish a new £6 million rural tourism infrastructure fund. It will take bids from communities and work with local councils, and it will allow even more people to enjoy this, the most beautiful country in the world. Friends, giving every child the best start with the opportunity to live a healthy life with a great education and in a clean environment is at the heart of our programme for a new Scotland. But today's generation faces another defining challenge. It is one that is rocking the foundations of political establishments across the democratic world. It is the challenge of our age, tackling the unfairness and inequality felt so sharply by so many. Here in the UK, inequality is among the worst in the developed world. We intend to drive change here too. The fact that real wages have stagnated or fallen heightens that sense of unfairness. So to our nurses, teachers, police officers, firefighters, to all of our dedicated public sector workers, let me reiterate this commitment today. Next year, we will seek pay deals that are affordable but also fair. The 1% pay cap will be lifted. We are the only government in the UK to make this unequivocal commitment. I think it's now time for others to do so too. Making decisions that tackle the big challenges is the responsibility of our government. Last year, this conference asked us to investigate the feasibility of a citizen's basic income, so we've announced the funding to do just that. You asked us also to tackle period poverty, so we set up a pilot scheme to help low-income women. And last month, we announced free sanitary products for all in our schools, our colleges and our universities. Conference, I can announce today that this groundbreaking commitment to tackle the gender injustice of period poverty will be delivered from the start of the new academic year next August. Scotland and the SNP, once again, leading the way in building a better, fairer country for all. Of course, a fair society must be paid for. Decisions taken at Westminster still determine our overall spending power. Revenue from income tax makes up just 1/3 of our budget. But the prospect of more Tory austerity and the impact of Brexit pose growing threats to our public services and the most vulnerable in our society. That means it is right to consider how our limited tax powers might help us protect what we value most. And as we do so, this question will be centre stage. What kind of country do we want to be? Too often, the debate I'd only correct that slightly. We want to be a fair, independent country. Friends, too often the debate on tax is framed as the economy versus public services. That's wrong. Our taxes pay for the support that our businesses need to thrive, just as they do for our health service and our schools. And our competitiveness as a country is a bit more than just our tax rates. It depends on the strength of our public services, the skills of our people, and the quality of our infrastructure. It is a fact that a good society needs a strong economy. But let us never forget this. No economy will reach its full potential without a strong, fair, inclusive society, and that's what our government will always work to protect. The Tories often accuse the last Labour government of bankrupting the UK. I'll leave Labour to answer for itself. But there is no doubt about this. There is a bankruptcy at the heart of this Tory government. It is a moral one. The rape clause, the misery being caused to so many by the shambles that is universal credit, treatment of disabled people, so appalling that the United Nations brands it a human catastrophe, and all the while tax cuts handed to those who earn the most. That is Tory austerity. Heartless, shameful, self-defeating. For the sake of decency, austerity must end, and it must end now. Conference, we stand for a Scotland that is fair at home, and we want our country to play its part in building a better, fairer world. There is now a battle of ideas underway across the globe, a battle between those who want to turn inwards and those determined to look outwards. We know what side we are on. Our party is internationalist to its core, and it will always be so. We've opened our doors and our hearts to refugees from Syria. We are working with the United Nations to support women in conflict resolution. In Africa and Pakistan, we're helping fight poverty and give girls the chance to be educated. We're sending aid to Rohingya Muslims fleeing violence in Burma. And our groundbreaking Climate Justice Fund is helping provide clean water in Malawi and irrigation in Zambia. Conference, we will never, ever accept that a limit should be placed on the contribution Scotland can make to building a better world. Strong voices for peace and justice are needed now more than ever. Last week, ICAN, the global campaign against nuclear weapons, won the Nobel Peace Prize. Our party stands proudly as part of the global movement for peace. So let us restate this today. No ifs, no buts from the SNP. We say no to weapons of mass destruction. We say no to nuclear weapons on the River Clyde or anywhere else. Friends, sometimes we underestimate the goodwill that the rest of the world has towards Scotland. Last week I visited Dublin to promote Scottish business. The warmth of feeling in Ireland towards Scotland is tangible, as is their frustration and utter bewilderment at the direction of the UK. While I was there, I met with the new Taoiseach, and I am delighted that he accepted my invitation to visit Scotland next year. We look forward to welcoming him as we strengthen the ties between our two countries. The UK government may want to retreat from Europe. We intend to stay at its heart. Conference, 15 months on from the Brexit vote, the Tories' failure to guarantee the rights of EU citizens to stay here shames them. We don't have the power to guarantee these rights ourselves. I wish that we did. But we will act where we can. The Tories want to make EU citizens apply for the right to stay and pay for the privilege of doing so. They should think again. But if a fee is imposed, I can confirm today that as a minimum, the Scottish Government will meet the cost for EU nationals working in our public services. It is a move that will give practical assistance to individuals. It will help us keep the doctors, nurses and other public sector workers that we rely on. And it will send a clear message to our fellow EU citizens in actions, not just in words, that we welcome you, we value you, and we want you to stay. Friends, immigration is not an easy subject for politicians, but we have a duty to be straight with people. If we accept the Tories' arbitrary target, the number of people working and paying taxes here will fall. That will mean fewer people to generate the tax revenues we need to pay for our public services and support our older citizens. An immigration policy designed to appease UKIP must go. A Scottish policy that meets Scotland's needs and lives up to Scotland's values must take its place. It is time to give control of immigration policy to our own Scottish Parliament and put ourselves in the driving seat of decisions that matter. In so many ways, the chaos unfolding at Westminster threatens Scotland's best interests. Labour's position is clear as mud. For the Tories, the Prime Minister has completely lost control. The hardliners are running amok. They loathe the European Union, and they don't much like devolution either. The EU withdrawal bill gives Westminster control over Scottish agriculture, fishing, the environment, GM crops, fracking licensing, and a whole host of other devolved powers. It is a blatant power grab. Conference, we will not allow a Tory government to undermine devolution. Our message to the Westminster Tories is clear: hands off Scotland's Parliament. We do want Scotland to stay at the heart of Europe. But that does not mean we think the EU is perfect. Sometimes it fails to live up to its founding values of human dignity, freedom, democracy, and equality. When the people of Catalonia, EU citizens, were violently attacked by police just for trying to vote, the EU should have spoken up loudly to condemn it. Friends, in Catalonia, I hope dialogue will replace confrontation. It is time for the Spanish government to sit down with the government of Catalonia. It is time for them to talk and to find a way forward. A way forward that respects the rule of law, yes, but a way forward that also respects democracy and respects the right of the people of Catalonia to determine their own future. Choosing your own future, being in charge of the decisions that shape your destiny, being in the driving seat and not simply at the mercy of events. That is the essence of independence. And friends, we are the party of independence. The case for independence doesn't depend on Brexit, but Brexit does show us what can happen when we don't control our own future. Over the years, there have been many decisions taken at Westminster that I disagree with. But in the course of my lifetime, there have been 3 defining moments when a decision taken there has changed fundamentally our country's path. In all 3, Scotland's interests have been cast aside. In the 1970s, when oil was discovered in the North Sea, Westminster had a decision to make: set up an oil fund or not. They chose not to. Independent Norway took a different decision. Last month, their oil fund topped $1 trillion. 1 trillion reminders that taking your own decisions is always better than letting others take them for you. After the financial crash, Westminster was faced with another choice: stimulate the economy or impose austerity. They chose austerity. The result has been a £3 billion cut to Scotland's budget, the dismantling of the welfare state, and thousands more children growing up in poverty. It is shameful. And now Westminster is pursuing the hardest possible Brexit, knowing that it will make us all poorer. Just think if those decisions had been taken in Scotland instead. The difference could be dramatic. The security of a multi-billion-pound oil fund, investment, not Tory-imposed austerity, and a country at the very heart of Europe. When we think about those wasted opportunities, it should make us all the more determined that in future we will do things differently. It should make us determined to put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. Conference, as I have always said, Scotland should have the right to choose our future when the terms of Brexit are clear. We have a mandate to give people that choice, and that mandate was won fairly and squarely. But exercising it must be done with the interests of all of Scotland at heart. People want clarity about Brexit first, and we respect that. But to all of you here in this hall and across our country who are impatient for change, let me say this: We may not yet know exactly when the choice will be made, but we can, we must, and we will make the case for independence always. With the UK government so engulfed in chaos and taking the country down a path of self-imposed decline, the need to do so has never been greater. So let us make our case with conviction. Let us address concerns head on. And above all, let us inspire confidence in our fellow citizens that the way things are now is not the way they must always be. There is a better future to be had for all of us if we choose to build that future together. Friends, the gap between Scotland's interests and Westminster's priorities has never been wider. The House of Commons is polarised. There are deep divides not just between parties but within them. Politicians tipped to be future Prime Ministers hark back to Agincourt and Waterloo. They look longingly to the past and the days of empire. We must look to the future. If the last year has taught us anything, it is this. In an age of rapid global change, we cannot afford to be bystanders. That means speaking up for universal democratic rights, and yes, it means campaigning for independence. But it also means acting and governing today. Taking action now so that everyone has a stake in Scotland's success. Providing opportunity and security for our young people. Caring for the elderly and those in need. Building a sustainable green economy to create jobs and place Scotland at the cutting edge of technology. Our focus must be on what really matters, building a better Scotland and contributing to a better world. That has never been so vital. The late, great Canon Kenyon Wright once said this: "There is another way. It is marked the road of hope. Hope for a new nation at ease with its past, confident in its present, and hopeful for its future. This is the time to believe in and work for that better future. This is the time to put ourselves firmly in the driving seat of our own destiny. That is what the people of Scotland deserve. Conference, that is what we will deliver." Thank you.